So you think you've found the key to a song using whatever method works for you. That's awesome, that's great. But what if you're not 100% sure you've got it right? What if you think you found it, but then try and plug in the scales from that key and they just sound awful? Well, in this lesson, you're going to learn how to make sure that the key you figured out is the right one and avoid making the two biggest mistakes that bass players make when they try and figure out the key, and you'll do it using 3 magic numbers. If you've used any of the methods to figure out the key of a song, then congratulations. Even if you're not sure, even if you didn't get it right the first time, good on you for giving it a go. Now, if you've found that you've tried figuring out the key and you're not sure if you've made a mistake, maybe you even know you've got it wrong, chances are you've made one of 2 mistakes. There are 2 super common ones that people make when they try and figure out the root. They are, number 1, thinking that the 3rd of the key is the root, or number 2, thinking that the 5th of the key is the root. So if the actual key is C, and C is the root, it wouldn't be uncommon for people to think that the 3rd and the 5th note, 1, 2, 3, and the 5th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that note there, it wouldn't be uncommon for them to think that either of those options are the root when they're not. This makes total sense, by the way. Other than the root, the 3rd and the 5th are the most important notes within a key. So if you've picked out either of them, this isn't actually a bad thing at all. You're actually on the right track. You just need to use this test I'm about to show you to find the real root. It works like this. All we're going to do is look for a better option as the root. If we think we've found the root, we're going to make sure we're not using the 5th or using the 3rd and thinking that they're the root. Yeah, so it's a double barrel test. It comes in 2 parts. Now, first mistake was the 5th. So first of all, we're going to talk about testing for the 5th. Yeah, when you're trying to make sure you're not making the first mistake, we get our first magic number, and that magic number is 7. Now, why? Why number 7? Because if you're making this mistake, you can go 7 frets in this direction, and that will be the actual key. For example, if I played this track for you, now, you might think that this note here is the root of the key. It's really prominent in the track, but it's actually not the root of the key. It's actually the 5th of the key. And if you go down 7 frets, so from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's the actual key, the C, not the G. Now the G is an important note within that key, but it's not the actual root. The actual root is C, 7 frets down. Have a listen to the C with the track. That's a C there. Yeah, feels really stable, really at home. The G is an important note within that key, but the C is much more stable, much more at home. Do you see how that works? Notice how scientific we're getting as well. We had a hypothesis that this G was the root of the key, and we tested it. We went down 7 frets. Is that a better option? Yes, it is. We tested against that option and found the other option worked way better. So we changed our mind about the root. This process of testing for the 5th is the same if you're in a major key or a minor key. No matter what kind of song you're playing, you can pretty much always test for the 5th like this, going down 7 frets on your fretboard. Alright, so that's our first mistake taken care of. What about the second mistake? Now, like I said before, the other mistake is thinking that the 3rd of the key is the root. Now this one gets a little bit more complicated because we actually have 2 different kinds of 3rds for different kinds of keys. We have major keys and minor keys. We've talked about these in the previous methods of finding a key. And obviously a major key is going to have a major 3rd and a minor key is going to have a minor 3rd. We can test for each of these to make sure we're not accidentally playing the 3rd thinking it's the root. Now both the major and minor 3rd have magic numbers as well, and they work the exact same way as the 5th. Now for the major 3rd, the magic number is 4, which means if we think we're in a major key, we can test out a new root and see if we can find it by going 4 frets down and seeing if that's a better fit. If it is, then great. If not, then we're probably on the root. For example, if we were on that same track we had before and we thought the E was a root, this note here, yeah, it might sound like this. It sounds pretty good most of the way, but if we go down the 1, 2, 3, 4 frets, so from here, 1, 2, 3, 4 frets. we end up on the C, and of course we've talked about that and how it works way better than anything else that would come in before. For minor keys, the magic number is 3. So if you think you've found the root and you know that you're in a minor key, try going 3 frets down and listening to figure out if that sounds better or worse, more stable or less stable. I've actually got another track in a minor key that we can use for exactly this. So imagine you heard this. You can hear it's in a minor key, it's a little bit darker, so you probably know to use a minor third. Yeah, so you use one of the other methods from the other videos, you decide that you think that this note is the root. Great, so let's test now for the third. So we go down 3 frets, because this note, it works pretty well across the whole thing, but if we go down 3 frets, is that going to sound more or less at home? So let's try now. So starting here, we go down 1, 2, 3. Now, does this sound more at home or less at home? It's definitely more, right? Especially on the first and last chord of the phrase. First one especially. Yeah, so this note is probably a better option for the root. Yeah, not that C, but instead this A. By the way, if you're not sure you're in a major key or a minor key, test for both. Try going 4 frets down as well as 3 frets down. If neither sound better, then you're probably onto a winner. But if one does sound better, then you can test that note out using this process and go through the whole kind of thing again. So, big picture, this is how you test to make sure that the note you think is the root of the key is actually the root of the key. But it can be a bit confusing, so I want to give you a flow chart that will show you exactly what to do at every step of the process. It looks like this. You're starting at the very top where it says hypothesis. This is where you think you've found the root. The first step is to make sure you're not playing the 5th, and you do that by going down 7 frets. If it sounds better, then you take that note and you go back to the top, and that's your new hypothesis. Now, if it sounds, if you test for the 5th and it sounds worse or about the same level of stability, then you move on and test for the 3rd. Yeah, so go 4 frets down for a major third, 3 frets down for a minor third. Now, if the note you come up with sounds better, then you take that new note and you start the process all over again. But if it sounds worse, sounds less stable, then chances are you've picked the right note for the key. Let's apply this in a real world kind of situation. I've got one final track we can use this process for. So first things first, let's just have a listen and see what we can find. If you want to figure out the key as we go through, go for it by all means, see if you can pick it out. So, this is what we're working with. Okay, so you may have already figured out the key, and if that's the case, awesome, that's great. But let's say we had a listen, and we had a listen through this one, and we heard this note a ton. It's a ton in the melody, just repeats over and over and over. Yeah, so you think that this note, this G sharp, is the root. And in fact, if you play this note through the whole progression, it works pretty well. And this sounds pretty bright, pretty happy-ish kind of sounding song, so it's probably in a major key. So we've got a candidate, a hypothesis, that G sharp, and we think it's a major key, so let's try and play a G sharp major scale over this and see how it sounds. Here's our G sharp, so let's try, oh my goodness. Alright, so straight off the bat, we've got tons of notes that sound pretty bad. This is a pretty good sign that G sharp is not the root that we're looking for. Let's put this flowchart to use. So our hypothesis is that our root is G sharp or A flat, however you want to look at it. So if we start at the top of our chart, the first thing we'll do is test for the 5th, which means going down 7 frets. So if we start at this G sharp, we'll go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That gives us a C sharp. So let's try this C sharp over the track, see how it sounds. Okay, so there are some places where the C sharp works all right, and some places where it doesn't. But if you have to play a C major scale over the whole track, have a listen to how that sounds. Oh my god. Alright, there are some real clangers in there. Like this note here, that one in there. Ugh. So C sharp here probably isn't the root. So let's move on to the next stage of our flowchart and see if our original hypothesis, that G sharp, was in fact the third. So if we're in a major key, which we've kind of figured out that we are, we have to try the note that's 4 frets down from this G sharp. So in this case, that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, that note right there, and E. So let's try that over the whole track. Okay. It's working over these chords pretty well. Okay, so this actually works pretty much over the whole thing, right? This could very possibly be our root. And in fact, let's try and play our E major scale over the whole track. See if it still holds up. Oh. Yeah, so E major works really well. The scale, it's working well over the whole track. So we're in a pretty good place, right? But that doesn't mean we're finished yet. We still need to go back to the top of the flowchart with our new hypothesis, the E, and make sure that the E isn't actually the third or the fifth of the actual key. So again, let's start at the top with our E and go 7 frets down, test for the fifth. So if we start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, gives us an A. So if we're playing that A over the whole track, it'll sound like this. I'll go up high actually. Okay, works over the first chord but not, works there, but really doesn't work there. That one's fine. That one's fine as well. But this one really, it wants to be there. Yeah? So if we're playing the A over the whole track, it's going to work well in some places, but definitely not in others. Whereas the E worked over pretty much the whole thing. So the A in general doesn't work as well. That means we can move on to the next stage, testing for the third. Yeah, so if we go 4 frets down from our new hypothesis, this E, we'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, a C. So let's play that C against the track. Oh my god, immediately this whole thing falls apart. There's no way that this C is the real root, yeah? It's just too dissonant and too out there. This almost certainly means that E is the right answer. And in fact, if you use the chord dissection method with all the chords in this progression, you do in fact get E major. But this process, testing to make sure you haven't accidentally made one of the 2 biggest mistakes that people make, is great for giving you clarity and confidence. The confidence to be 100% certain what key you're in so you can make good note choices that you know are going to sound great in advance, as well as just being able to communicate with other musicians and talk the language of the music. This whole process may take some time at the start, but the more you do it, the more you'll find your ears open up and you'll be able to do it faster and faster and faster. And eventually, you'll be able to do this whole process in a fraction of a second. This is part of the reason that some musicians are able to immediately get up and start playing songs they've never heard before with people they may have never even played with before. It might seem like magic to other people, but you know there's a process that you can follow and do this for yourself, figure out the key no matter what the circumstances. Of course, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to help you out. Just send me an email and I'll be happy to do what I can for you. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it and I'll catch you in another lesson soon. Cheers.